السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Around these days we are commemorating the demise anniversary of Lady al-Banin, whose name was Fatima bint Huzam. She was the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam, who was said to be someone who was devoted to Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam, someone who was a lover of Ahlul Bayt, someone who gave birth to 4 lions, 4 boys who were lions, who fought for Hussein, beside Hussein, who gave their lives for Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. And that lady, it is narrated that the news of her boys, when it was given to her, it was given in such a way that they would give the news of one by one of her sons. And then every time she would hear about one of the sons, she would say, "But tell me about Hussein." They would tell her about the second son, that he attained Shahada, that he was killed on the path of Allah. And she would say, "Tell me about Hussein." Then they would tell her about the third son. She would say, "Tell me about Hussein, is he okay?" Then they would tell her about Abbas. Abbas passed on the path of Allah. And then she would say, "Tell me about Hussein." To the soul of that lady, and inshallah, and all the shuhada, all the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, let's please recite Surah Al-Fatiha with salawat. Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam says in Dua Kumail, "Ya Allah, wa kam min thana'in jamilin lastu ahlan lahu nashartah." Oh God, how much of beautiful praise that I am unworthy of, but you have spread about me with your kindness. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله سيدنا ومولانا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه الأخيار المنتجبين وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا تولى سعى في الأرض ليفسد فيها ويهلك الحرث والنسل والله لا يحب الفساد. Quran chapter 2 verse 205. And when they leave, they strive throughout the land to spread mischief in it and destroy the crops and cattle. And Allah does not like mischief. What are the elements of corruption in a community or in a society? And how can an individual corruption or corruption at the individual level affect the community or reach a corruption to the community level? What would make people conceal the truth and not expose the truth? And is it the fact that the truth should be exposed and told every time and every place, or is there a place and time for exposing the truth? What is the difference between inner humiliation or true humiliation and what might appear to be humiliation? So with all these questions, inshallah, I'll try to answer them in the short time that I have in this talk, starting from what is attributed to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam, that it is narrated that he said in Nahj al-Balagha, وَاعْلَمُوا رَحِمَكُمُ اللَّهِ أَنَّكُمْ فِي زَمَانٍ. And know, may God have mercy upon you. Imam is addressing the people of his time. And know, may Allah's mercy be upon you, that you live in an era in which those who speak the truth are few. And the tongue is heavy in speaking the truth. And those who adhere to the truth are humiliated. An era whose people are persisting on disobedience, accustomed to hypocrisy and insincerity. Their youngsters are naughty. Their elders are sinful. Their scholars are hypocrite. And their peers are insincere. Their young do not honor the elders. And their rich do not support the poor. Imam Ali is describing the corruption at his time, but with a bit of a reflection, we actually realize that what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying, he's describing corruption that we also see here today, in this day and age. Because history and time is a set of repeating episodes sometimes, with different shapes, different forms, right? Different words, different tools, different people, but the core is the same. Because this is the nature of this world. There's the path of corruption and there's the path of righteousness, and we have the free will to choose what we choose. So let me start with reflecting a bit about these words. I will leave the first three inshallah to the end, and that is when the Imam says, those who speak the truth are few, and the tongue would become heavy speaking the truth, and those who adhere to the principles and the truth are humiliated. Let me leave that to the end. So Imam is saying, you're living in an era whose people are persisting on sin or persisting on disobedience of God. Sometimes some of us might commit a mistake, might commit a sin, but we would return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'd ask for forgiveness and Allah would forgive. But sometimes we would say astaghfirullah, we would ask God to forgive, but we know that tomorrow I'll do it again. I want to do it again. Astaghfirullah, but I'll do it again. That's persistence. Persistence is actually living a lifestyle of sin, living a lifestyle of disobedience of God. We're all sinful. We all might commit mistakes. But when your lifestyle becomes a lifestyle of disobedience of God, something that is not godly, that's persistence of sin, on sin. Sometimes it is not only about, the religious commands and prohibitions. Sometimes it's about breaking the law, for example. Cheating. Living a life where breaking the law, breaking the rules for the sake of breaking them. That's persistence on sin. The youngsters or the people are accustomed to hypocrisy and insincerity. Accustomed to it. Hypocrisy. So people preach values. They say they follow lofty values of honesty and integrity and sincerity. But actually when push comes to shove, you would see racism emerges. You would see sectarianism floats up. Right? Their youngsters are naughty. Youngsters are indisciplined. They don't follow the commands, the advices. Their elders are sinful. The elders who are the critical mass and the weight of wisdom in the community, they reach a stage where they forget that death has now become much nearer than it had ever been before. And they would still be forgetting their responsibilities. And they would still not be feeling the responsibility actually and neglecting the path or the righteous path or the straight path. Their scholars are hypocrite. The scholars, those who have knowledge about God, those who have knowledge about what God wants, what God dislikes. The scholars who are supposed to be an embodiment of the values, the embodiment of the principles, who are supposed to be role models, inviting people to the way of God. Those scholars suddenly are hypocrite. They preach what they don't do, which is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes very much. Allah says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. O those who believe, O you who believe, why do you say what you do not do? كَبُرَ مَقْتًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Allah dislikes it, despises it very much that you say what you don't do. And this is where the people who sit on this minbar, the people who talk to people and who advise people, very intense upon them. when they say something that or preach something that they don't do. Someone like myself reminds people of doing this, not doing this, but then I would be doing this. I would be disobeying God. Yeah? Kabura maqta. That's a very dangerous position actually. May Allah save us all, inshallah, with His mercy. And you would see sometimes people look at the scholars, and because of their behaviors, because of their hypocrisy, they might be repelled from deen. And this is a major problem that we have in so many areas, so many places. The people who preach religion, the people who claim that they are speaking on behalf of God and inviting to the way of God, they would be the people who would be repelling people, repelling others from God, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a sign of corruption in a community. And their peers are insincere. When love and sincerity disappears from the hearts of us here, you see the brother, your sister in the community, and you know that they are either cheating you, or they are lying, or they are not being honest. What kind of a community will you have then? Does this not lead to a weak community, a destroyed community, disintegrated community or society? Their young do not honor their elders. This is where Amir al-Mu'mineen is referring to what? To this intergenerational communication that has to always remain. A sign of corruption in a society or a community is what? When the youngsters do not respect or honor the elders. They do not listen to their pieces of advice. And this disconnection between the generations is very risky, very dangerous, because that's one way to preserve the transfer of the values, the transfer of the experience. Our elders, our uncles, our fathers, our mothers, our aunties, they've been through a cumulative of hundreds of years of human experience, and they're giving it to you in a form of a piece of advice. That's a beautiful gift for free that we have. So we need to make sure that we honor the elders for that. So the youngsters, make sure that they honor, they listen to the pieces of advice. Listen to the direction that your parents give you. Listen to it. Listen to it. There's wisdom behind it. It saves you a lot of trouble. Otherwise, when you don't honor the previous generations, it's a sign of corruption. Number 11, Imam says also, the rich do not support the poor. When the person who is wealthy and he's insensitive about those who are in need, and maybe living a lavish life when some neighbor of his is sleeping hungry, maybe, this only increases this gap between the rich and the poor. This absence of social solidarity between the mu'mineen, between the people, it increases that gap. It reaches, or it causes this so-called social class in a community, which is also a sign of corruption when the gap is really high and big. So that's one level. Another level is that sometimes you have people who are actually benefiting from such a status in the community. Some people work towards this corruption in the society. They're benefiting in some way or shape or form. When some people do, when we talk about al-fasad fil ard, corruption in the land, causing corruption in the land, what this could mean is that actually you are working towards reaching let's say, an educational system that is corrupt, a political system that is corrupt, an economical system that is corrupt. And when you have a society like this, a community like this, it only generates corruption. Sometimes it starts from one individual behavior where you, let's say, you like to cheat, you like to pull strings, you like to go into dodgy ways to achieve an aim. Imagine every individual is like this in the community, or a certain, let's say, a big enough number of people. Then you will have a system that not only is corrupt, it generates nothing but corruption. An educational system that generates corrupt people. And in this kind of community or this kind of society, what happens is that the believers, those who stick to the principles, they become a few. And this takes me to what Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam said in the first part of this hadith. That you live in an era where the people who say the truth, the people who stick to the truth, are a few. It becomes very difficult to stick to principles suddenly. Yeah? So the believers, the people who stick to the principles, they would be hurt. They would be living a difficult life in such a society. Hence, some verses in the Quran actually talk about this. community responsibility. When Allah in the Quran, chapter 45, verse 28, when He says, وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ, describing the Day of Judgment, that you will see every community on its knees. Every community will be summoned to its record of deeds. They all will be told, this day you will be rewarded for what you used to do. There will be a recompensation now. You'll be recompensed. It's not like the community of Milton Keynes will be summoned on the Day of Judgment together because I was born in Milton Keynes, for example. No. It is basically you will be summoned with those who collaborated with you on reaching this level of community corruption. Community corruption. They will be gathered as a community because the individual actions they have done, they reached a level of community corruption. So everyone who's responsible, they'll be brought forward. Second part, Imam Ali is saying what? In that era, the tongue is heavy about saying the truth. Tongue becomes heavy about saying the truth. Of course, when some people, let's say, feel pressure about saying the truth, when some people feel they have to conceal the truth or not say it, or when someone does not say the truth, there might be different reasons for this. And this is something very important that we need all to understand, by the way. Number one, it could be that if someone is not saying the truth, is saying something that is not true, it could be that they don't know the truth. It could be that they don't know the right path. Or it could be that they know the right path, they know the truth, they know the principles, they know the values, but they don't have enough experience to implement it, or when it comes to practice. What do I mean? Let's get an example. Let's have an example. The Khawarij. Khawarij. Who are the Khawarij? Who are the Khawarij? Who were the Khawarij at the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Yes. Who were these people? They left, They abandoned Imam Ali's army. Why? Why did they do that? Yeah, because the army of Muawiyah left the Masahif, the Quran, and they started to say, look, the Quran is a governor between us and you, so it's not Ali, not Muawiyah, right? And they would recite this verse from the Quran, La hukma illa lillah. There's no government or rulership except for God. That's a word of truth, they're saying. But their inexperience and their mistake in applying it when push comes to shove, when the reality demands it, they applied it wrongly. They said, no, Ali, we don't want you as a leader. Allah is the leader. Ali alayhi salam, he would correct them. He would tell them, this is a word of righteousness, but what is desired behind it is wrong, is falsehood. Imam would say that these people forgot that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indeed a governor, yes, but He governs through someone. There needs to be a ruler, there needs to be a leader, there needs to be an imam who would manage the affairs of the people. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manage and rule? Kalimatu haqqin yuradu biha batil. That's what the Imam said. And these people, the Khawarij, were people who were ascetic, they were zahid, they were abid, they were renouncing of this, worldly material affairs, wearing simply, they would be buzzing like bees at nights with the recitation of the Quran. But they got it all wrong when it came to practice. So that's one reason why someone would not say the truth, or what they would say is not the truth. They don't know it, or that they're inexperienced. The second is that someone might conceal the truth because they have a personal interest. Someone is living off cheating, falsehood. Someone who has an interest. Someone who's gaining and living from this corrupt system. Why would he has to say anything against it? I'm benefiting from it. Why should I go through the headache? I have good connections with people, good relations, good relationships. So why should I lose this? Personal interest. Personal interest. Beyond what is needed for survival, let's say. Just to be cautious. So that's the second reason. Another reason is not for personal interest, but for what? For a public interest, for the greater good. What do I mean? Let me give an example. Sometimes you have in a community, let's say us Muslims, you have an enemy that is malicious and that comes to you and tells you, look, you're a believer, right? You say, yes. You say the truth, right? Yes. Okay, say this truth, and that truth, if you say it, you actually bring fitna. You actually cause fights between the mu'mineen. Yes, say this on the minbar. Say this on social media. Say this, which is true, but you have to say it because you're a believer and they put you in a position where the circumstances pressure you in such a way that if you say this truth, you will cause corruption. It's truth. It's truth. It will cause corruption. It happens. Unfortunately, this is the world we're living in. The world where justice is not completely prevailing. This is the world of limitation that we're living in. If you want a world where every truth exposed will not cause any fights or corruptions or bloodshed, that's the afterlife. That's not here. That's Jannah, inshallah. So sometimes you have a malicious enemy, actually, might be doing this and telling you this. So this is where you would conceal the truth because of what? Because of public interest, not because of your personal interest. In fact, sometimes your personal interest is to, or the concealing of the truth, it might be opposing to your personal interest. Does this remind us of something? Do you remember the concept of taqiyya? You remember the concept of taqiyya? We believe that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the Imams, what happened with Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam? Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba. Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba, did he not give the Khilafah to Muawiyah? What was that? Was it not that this person, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, was working for a greater strategic goal? Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, why did he live 10 years when Muawiyah was still alive? Why did he not fight or revolt, as some people say? Why? Isn't it because there is a public interest? There is a wider goal, a more important goal, that is the preservation of the message of Islam? Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, why go far? Imam Ali from the beginning, 25 years, his right of Khilafah was taken from him. And he would say, فَصَبَرْتُ, I took patience. While it was very painful, I would see my heritage being plundered, being played with. I took patience. Because what? لَأُسَلِمَنَّ مَا سَلِمَتْ أُمُورُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. I would resort to patience so long as the corruption, the injustice is done unto me personally only and not on the community. These are difficult decisions for the mu'mineen to do, but they are necessary. That was the will of the Prophet ﷺ to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Patience. Patience. Some people ask, why did Imam Ali alayhi salam, did he not, fight those who claimed Khilafah in the beginning? That's the reason. Who said that fight solves the problem? Who said that this kind of corruption would be removed with a worse corruption? Imam Ali says it to his people in Kufa. If I wanted to fix you and make you disciplined with force, I could, but I wouldn't. Because what? لا أرى صلاحكم في فساد نفسي. I do not see that I should discipline you and fix you through corrupting myself. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi. So this is taqiyya of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, meaning that, look, all the khulafa, all the rulers, let me call them kings actually, especially from Banu Umayyah, all these kings, were they not corrupt? They were corrupt. They were corrupt. You see Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, for example, at his time there was the revolution of Zayd bin Ali, right? The revolution of Shaheed Zayd. Why did Imam Sadiq not make a revolution against this corrupt regime? Why? Was he missing courage? No, he was courageous. Was he missing knowledge? No, he was knowledgeable. Leadership? He was a leader. But no, he's working for a further strategic goal. And this is where we see the Imams alayhim salam, they would do everything possible so that they would not be put in a direct clash with the governments, because that would impede their goal that they were working towards. Imam Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, all these Imams, they had a bigger aim, a bigger target, a bigger goal that they were working towards. So, and we see in some narrations from the Imams actually telling this to their companions. Sometimes, not every truth has to be told and exposed. I'm not saying you have to lie in normal circumstances. But sometimes there's some information that not everyone is able to carry. Not everyone is able to comprehend. Not everyone has the capacity of receiving it and comprehending it. Ahlul Bayt would tell some companions like this, that Sometimes, let me narrate a quick one actually from the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, conceal our cause and don't announce it. Imam Sadiq would say, Ya mu'alla, uktum amrana wa la tudhi'hu. Or in some other hadiths, carrying our cause is not only accepting it, but also to protect it from those who cannot bear it. Not everyone has, the same background as you, the same intelligence as you, the same spiritual capacity as you. You don't go around and sharing things without calculating who the audience is. What's the implication of this is? Something important to think about. So, please recite salawat. So distinguishing these three scenarios is very important. Yeah, because sometimes some people might be hasty in judging. Why this person does not expose the truth? Why this person does not, let's say, criticize that specific corruption? Therefore, he's corrupt. If he does not stand against injustice, then he is unjust. He is unjust. He's corrupt. Yeah, you can't make judgments like this in general. You have to check: is it because of personal interest that this person is not talking against corruption, or is it because of public interest? Yeah. If it's personal interest, yes, we say no, right? We say no, that's not acceptable. You're living off this corruption, you're living off this injustice. That's not allowed, personal interest. Sometimes it's for community or public interest. There is something in fiqh that is called the principle of tazahum. Tazahum, the principle of conflict. What do I mean? Imagine this scenario. So first, we know that if you have a private property, can you access or enter that private property without the permission of the owner? Can you? What's the hukm there? Wajib, makruh, haram, permissible? What is it? It's haram. It's impermissible to access a property, a private property, without permission of the owner. Okay, we know that. That's haram. On the other hand, if someone is drowning and you know how to save them, you would have to go and save them. So what's the hukm there? Is it haram, wajib, mustahab, makruh? Wajib. It's wajib. It's obligatory upon you to do it. But if the person who's drowning is in a pool in a private property, what do you do then? That's a conflict. That's tazahum. It means that there is a situation where there is a wajib to do something, to cross that property, to go in without the permission of the owner, to save that person drowning, that's wajib, but crossing and entering the property without permission is haram. So what happens here is that because saving a life has a higher priority, right? Then the wajib that you have to do overrules the haram. So you have to go and save. So sometimes when we judge people or when we don't understand these differences that I talked about, why would someone conceal a truth or not expose a truth? You have to understand the reasons behind it. Because otherwise you would fall into misjudgments like this, misunderstanding the tazahum. And if we understand this, we really understand how Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam worked. We really understand how Imam Hussein alayhi salam, why did he go to battle and why Hassan did not go to battle. If you understand that, and you understand the aim and the goal being the message of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, then you're able to understand the lifetime of Ahlul Bayt as truly one person living for 300 years. From the history that we know, Imam Zaman alayhi salam, inshallah, he is also alive. One thing that I need to remind of, inshallah, I'll finish with this, is that not exposing the truth, sometimes concealing it, hiding it, that should be the exception. It's not the norm. It's not the norm. Yeah. So we need to make sure that this does not become the norm in these situations. How do we do that? First, by making sure that in our hearts we always reject the injustice. We always reject the corruption. Sometimes you're in a position where you can't talk. If you talk, you're imprisoned, or your group of people or your community is targeted. You fear for their life, for example. Yeah, so that's a situation where you can't really talk. But it doesn't mean that in your heart you do not reject it. You do reject it. You do reject it. That's number one. Number two, you act to change the circumstance. Not to say like, yeah, that's the circumstance I'm in. I can't do much. I reject it with my heart. I condemn it with my words, but I don't do anything about it. No, you do. You should actually work towards it so that you make it easier for the next generations to actually fight that corruption. At least do your part. Can I do something? Do it. within the limitations that you have. There's a story that I was told about Muslims in Spain, when the Catholics arrived in Spain, and all the Muslims were forced to convert to Christianity. And one sign of their true conversion was what? That they have to, every now and then, they have to come and they have to let's say, utter words of blasphemy against the Prophet, and they have to eat pork. They have to do that, right? And they would do that. And then the authority had doubts, basically. And what they did, they raided the houses of these Muslims who were practicing taqiyya, basically. And they found that they dug wells where they would hide their children and teach them Quran. So they would do something. Reject it with the heart, doing something about it within the means that were available. The last phrase that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says about this, or the description of the era where there is corruption, is what? Is that the people who adhere to principles, who say the truth, are humiliated. Of course, it doesn't mean that this is the humiliation that we think about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refuses humiliation for the believer. Yeah? There are multiple hadiths from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the individuals to do anything, except that they would humiliate themselves. They should not humiliate. You should not be put in a position to humiliate yourself. Yeah? And sin is one of these, actually. Sin, when you disobey God, when you follow your desires, when you follow your lowly desires, then this is a form of actually you humiliating yourself in some way. But actually, humiliation means that the believer, when he has to go to the position of not exposing the truth, not implementing the will of God on earth, or seeing that this reform will be far from today, it would hurt. The believer would be put in a psychological state that makes it very difficult. Very difficult. Yasir and Sumayya in the beginning days of Islam, great companions of the Prophet, great believers. They were killed, but the Prophet did not go and fight Quraysh immediately, did he? Was the blood of Yasir and Sumayya cheap? No, but the Prophet was working for a strategic goal, a further objective. The same thing that happens when someone slanders you, when someone curses you, when someone displays something unethical or behaves unethically towards you, and you decide to not reply back in the same way. Is this humiliation or is this izzah? Is this dignity? Humiliation is with disobeying God. That's the true humiliation. So this is what we understand from the words of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that He may help us identify what the elements of corruption are. And inshallah, that He may preserve our communities from any form of corruption. And that He may, inshallah, allow us to be wise enough to know about the things that we talk about, when and where. To be wise enough to implement the method of Ahlul Bayt, to live their life, to live on their path. And inshallah, to pass away and leave this world on their path بإذن الله. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوات.